How many of you felt confused or excluded by that introduction? Quite a few of you. Well, a lack of inclusion is an issue that the deaf community worldwide faces on a daily basis. My name is Callie, and today I will be presenting my service learning called Hands On, based in Nairobi, Kenya. So, when I was in 8th grade, I took Kenyan Sign Language lessons, and in doing so, I volunteered with a local church that offers services to the deaf and hard of hearing community in Nairobi, the city that I grew up in. And in doing so, I was able to witness the injustices that the community faces. And so, as part of my 12th grade service learning project, I wanted to revisit this community. So my definition of service is the act of repeatedly doing something selflessly for another individual, the environment, or a community in order to enrich or relieve burdens on the lives of other people. But what is the problem? Well, in Kenya, 5.5% of the population are deaf. And since there are around 50 million people in the country, this accounts for over 2.7 million people. Fewer than 10% of deaf children have access to education, as compared to 85.4% of hearing children, and only 53.3% of deaf people are employed, compared to 75.8% of hearing people. So as you can see, there are some issues within this community, and I wanted to address them, but I couldn't do this alone. So I reached out to my old Kenyan Sign Language teacher. Her name is Liz, and she is an official Kenyan Sign Language interpreter and teacher, as well as an official interpreter for Citizen TV, which is Kenya's #1 news station. So after reaching out to her, I had to reach out to different organizations that are already addressing the issue. However, after not hearing back between the end of Japan, so this time last year, and the beginning of Brazil, which was in September, I resorted to a more personal form of communication since email wasn't working, and I reached out to the Deaf Kenya Film Festival through Instagram. So the Deaf Kenya Film Festival is an organization whose mission is to celebrate, recognize, and support films that bring awareness to deaf culture, as well as advocate for deaf filmmakers and actors in Kenya, but also internationally. So the first thing I did is I had a virtual meeting with Nadia Shakur, who is essentially the main organizer / media coordinator, and she told me a little bit more about what they do. So as mentioned, they host a deaf film festival once a year, and the 2024 edition was their 4th edition, where they got contributors from the US, UK, France, Iran, and Uganda. And although they are doing some great work already, there were some gaps that needed to be filled, such as fundraising, merchandise, creating a website, and promotion through film. So that's where I stepped in, and this brings me to the action portion of my service learning project. So one of my biggest issues was being away from home for 6 months between the start of Canada and the end of Brazil. So I wasn't able to help them in person in Kenya. But this issue was addressed by having regular communication in the executives group chat, because they recruited me as their marketing advisor. So they would communicate their needs with me, and I would report back to them on the progress that I was making. And one of the areas they needed help with was their website. So here are some images of their old website, which was essentially a Canva document. And although it was very informative and visually appealing, it was only sent out to a selective audience based on people they sent it out to. So it wasn't able to reach a wide demographic of people. So what I did is I created an official website that contains 3 sections. The home section, which tells you a little bit more about the organization and what they do, an event section, which tells you about the film festival itself and how to purchase tickets, and a contact us section, so you can directly get in contact with them and check out their social media. And as you can see, in the URL are the words Deaf Kenya and Film and Festival. So if you type those words in any sort of combination on Google, this should be one of the first websites to show up. So this gave them access to a wider range and wider demographic of people than before. And there's also a Shop Now section, which brings me into the second area that I helped them with, which was merchandise. So they requested to have 25 t-shirts and 25 tote bags printed out with their logo on it to be able to sell for profit. And so what I did is I got in contact with a few different merchandise printing companies, and they sent me their quotations/invoices. And as you can see, that's the lowest price that was offered versus the highest price. And already for Kenya, these prices were quite expensive. But with some negotiating, my dad and I were able to get the price down to $258, which is a great improvement. And unfortunately, I was already here in Vietnam when the merchandise was done being printed. But here are some pictures of my mom and dad distributing them to Simon, who's the CEO of the Deaf Kenya Film Festival. And on the next slide is a short message from Simon. And this is essentially him saying thank you. Saying thank you for the merchandise and explaining that they're going to sell half of the merchandise now for profit and keep the other half for the 2025 film festival so that they can sell it on site there. And the last area that I helped them with, if you can go to the next slide, is a promotional video. So I met up with Simon and I interviewed him. I asked him a series of questions that both advocate for the deaf community as a whole, but also promote the organization itself and the work that the Deaf Kenya Film Festival does. And I videoed him responding to the questions. And one of my challenges here was that I'm not completely fluent in Kenyan Sign Language. I'm only at a level 1 proficiency. But we did have his interpreter, Gideon, who's on your right, and my external mentor, Liz, on my right, on your left, there to facilitate the interpretation and to assure accurate translation. And so my hopes with this project moving forward is for the Deaf Kenya Film Festival to make a profit off of the merchandise, to raise more awareness for the deaf community in Nairobi, and to attract sponsors for the company. And this is where the video comes in. I hope to gain attention to the video through both reaching out to larger organizations, for example, hearing aid companies or local radio stations in Nairobi, to attract sponsors for the Deaf Kenya Film Festival, and hopefully have both more international and local involvement in the film festival annually. So one of my biggest takeaways doing this project is that the act of service is doing something with an individual and community and not for them. And so I believe that if I continue to repeatedly work with the Deaf Kenya Film Festival, I'll be able to enrich and relieve burdens on the deaf community and my community in Nairobi, Kenya as a whole. Thank you.